Coming up, a U.S. envoy heads to Israel to usher in a ceasefire with Hamas. Can the White House navigate the tricky negotiations? As the hunger crisis in Gaza deepens and international pressure for a Palestinian state grows, plus keeping the peace at home.
It's a lot of work that goes into this and frankly, a lot of faith.
Our exclusive interview with House Speaker Mike Johnson on his work to unite a diverse GOP. And the president touting the economy.
Right now, there's no inflation. Everybody thought there would be. All we have is billions of dollars of cash pouring into our country.
What it all means and whether the economic good news is here to stay. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
A White House mission to save lives and end the humanitarian crisis in the Middle East. Good evening, I'm John Jessup.
And in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. President Trump's Mideast envoy, Steve Witkoff, is in Israel tonight, meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as aid groups warn of famine in Gaza.
Witkoff's pushing for ceasefire and a hostage deal, while the United States plans new food distribution centers. Israel, meanwhile, reported 270 trucks entered Gaza on Wednesday, barely half of what the United Nations says is needed. Meanwhile, the families of Israeli hostages are calling for their loved ones' release.
Sign this deal that will bring this war to an end. We don't want to lose more life.
On a related note, Canada says it will recognize a Palestinian state in September. President Trump blasting the move, saying the fastest way to end the war is for Hamas to surrender and release all of the hostages.
All right, for more on this, let's bring in our panel. Senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright at the White House and Michelle London, Capitol Hill correspondent. Kelly, to you first, what is the mood at the White House tonight, and how hopeful are they about making any progress here?
So, Jenna, the answer to your question is that the White House remains very much committed to bringing about some ceasefire and a peace deal between Israel and Hamas. And the president is very much concerned about not only getting the hostages home, but also helping to alleviate the humanitarian crisis unfolding on the ground in Gaza. Now, earlier today, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters during the press briefing that she had spoken with, by phone, to Special Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff, along with Ambassador Mike Huckabee, and the two men had a productive meeting with Bibi Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders about the situation on the ground and about this series of food distribution going into Gaza. And those two men said it was a productive meeting and that they are now looking forward to trying to do more to bring more food distribution in, as well as to provide more humanitarian aid.
I believe, you just mentioned Witkoff and Ambassador Huckabee. I believe they're traveling to Gaza tomorrow to inspect some of those food distribution centers. Is there anything more that you can tell us about that?
Well, John, you are correct. That is taking place tomorrow, and Caroline Leavitt telling the reporters that the two men will go into the Gaza area tomorrow. Look, this is a big deal because these are two of the highest-ranking members of the Trump administration to actually go into this war zone in Gaza, where there has been a lot of threat of life and property, if you will, and they're taking a very courageous, bold move to go in to be the eyes and ears on the ground for the president to have an accurate assessment of just what's going on there, how much food distribution is really getting in, what will have to be done to increase and expand that food distribution, as well as to provide dire humanitarian need, and give the president a solid report and their assessment once they leave the area.
Yeah. London, this issue, and particularly the humanitarian crisis part of it, is animating lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. What are you hearing and seeing?
Well, certainly the horrific images we've seen along the Gaza Strip, especially concerning the starving children we've seen, it sparked an outcry and a call to action with members of Congress from both sides of the aisle. I'll start with a statement from New York Congressman Richie Torres. He's been an avid, outspoken supporter of Israel, especially since the brutal October 7th attacks. He posted to X recently that it is possible to hold two thoughts at once, Jenna. He says the world should never forget that Hamas is the primary cause of this war and untold suffering in Gaza. But when it comes to this humanitarian crisis there, Torres says that the U.S. and Israel have a moral obligation to do their part in alleviating hunger. Earlier today, South Carolina Republican Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene said she spoke directly to a pastor in Gaza. The pastor revealed to Greene that not only are children starving, but that Christians and innocent people are being killed. Echoing Torres, Taylor Greene condemns the October 7th attacks on Israel, but follows this statement with the question, are innocent Israeli lives more valuable than innocent Palestinian or Christian lives? It's a question we all could ask.
Interesting to see people on different sides of the spectrum kind of coming to the same conclusion there. London, this week the Senate rejected two measures to block more than $675 million in arms sales to Israel, and that included a growing number of Democrats. What more can you tell us about that vote?
Well, first of all, John, these two resolutions would have blocked at least 5,000 bombs from the U.S. sale, and along with tens of thousands of assault rifles and other equipment from making it to Israel. But yesterday's vote confirms that there's still some pretty strong bipartisan support when it comes to arming Israel. You had every Senate Republican and still a majority of Democrats joining them in voting against the resolutions. Including Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, along with Senator Cory Booker. Now, here's the big picture, though. As this humanitarian crisis grows in Gaza, Democrats are growing more leery in supporting sending weapons to Israel. Back in January, you had just 10 Democrats, senators voting to block arming Israel. But just this week, that number has already grown to 27.
All right.
John and Jenna, if I can add real quickly to my colleague Michelle London right there. So here at the White House, the president believes very strongly that the way to end this crisis is for Hamas to come to the table, release the hostages immediately, and broker this deal. That will open up the door for those food centers and more humanitarian relief to take place. The president is standing very strong with Israel and echoing the sentiment that Bibi Netanyahu has expressed, that there is no daylight between Israel and America. Ambassador Mike Huckabee adding that as well. The president has a big heart, according to Caroline Leavitt, and many people have seen that heart in action. He's a big humanitarian. He wants to do something on the ground to help those in need, but he also wants the hostages released and wants to bring an end to this ongoing crisis.
All right, Kelly and London, thank you both very much.
Thanks, guys. Well, a rare show of bipartisanship is advancing through Congress in the form of a Senate bill. The Road to Housing Act 2025 is sweeping legislation aimed to make home ownership more accessible and more affordable across America. The Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee pushed the bill forward this week, making it the first bipartisan measure to come out of the committee in more than a decade. I spoke with Chairman Senator Tim Scott about the legislation.
We have a real strong package because we didn't think red or blue, black or white, rich or poor. I thought about my mom, a single mother, struggling to make her ends meet, wanting to live the American dream. And for so many Americans, that starts with a home.
The ranking Democrat on the committee, Senator Elizabeth Warren, says the legislation shows it's possible for both parties to put families ahead of politics.
All right, then for more on the housing market and the American economy, we are joined by Bankrate financial analyst Stephen Cates. Stephen, welcome. So the National Association of Realtors says the median price for an existing home right now in America is upwards of $423,000. But the latest Case-Shiller Home Price Index out this week, it shows the smallest increase in 2 years. Is that a hopeful sign for people looking to buy?
I think it can be. Ultimately, there's two really issues at play. Prices are very high, mortgage rates are very high. And so even if we may start to see home prices stop going up or even start to go down, high mortgage rates are still going to be a bit of an issue for many Americans who may not be able to actually cover a mortgage payment that is going to be high.
Tomorrow marks President Trump's tariff deadline. He's been making some announcements in the past few days, today as well. What do you think that will mean for most Americans, economically speaking?
Well, any deals that are done or not done that come in the next few days are unlikely to probably have a huge impact in the near term. What we've all noticed is how long it's taking for some of these tariffs to manifest themselves into the end consumer prices. So deals that were done and tariffs introduced earlier this year in April and May, we're only now starting to see prices increase. And we are seeing retailers and businesses here in the U.S. eating some of those costs and not passing as much on to consumers as originally thought.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve's preferred measure of inflation out today shows a 2.6% year-over-year increase in June. I'm wondering your reaction to that and how tariffs are affecting some consumer prices.
Well, so we are seeing that tariffs are starting to work their way into the economy and prices are rising. This is now the second month of rising inflation and the rate of inflation. And this 2.6% is the highest we've had since February. And that mirrors what we're seeing in the consumer price index as well. So it's really hard to say that we're not going to see persistently higher prices and rising at a faster rate. But long-term inflation expectations have fallen precipitously from what many were thinking could be 5 or 6%, now down to something that might end up being 3 or 4%.
Stephen, in the minute or so that we have left, if you can, just go ahead and pull out your crystal ball tomorrow. We'll get the figures from the July jobs reports. What are you anticipating?
So I think the big thing that we're going to notice is that we're going to see much of this report is going to be all private payrolls, new jobs on the private sector. So while last month we had a pretty disappointing private payrolls report at 74,000 and nearly the equal amount in government jobs, that was mostly local and state jobs, we're going to see very little government jobs coming through in this report. The estimation is going to be that overall new payrolls are coming in at somewhere between about 105 and 110, and only about 5 or 10,000 of those would be government jobs. All right, we are out of time, and you did that quite well in the nick of time. Stephen Cates from Bankrate, thank you so much for your time tonight. My pleasure.
Well, a slim majority and deep division within the party. House Speaker Mike Johnson is leading the House GOP to push forward the president's agenda. Next on Faith Nation. Well, despite a narrow majority, House Speaker Mike Johnson has been able to navigate President Trump's legislative agenda through the Republican-controlled Congress.
And to what does he credit his success? CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody asked the Speaker about that and much more.
Let's finish the job for him. Vote yes on the bill.
For Mike Johnson, cheers from fellow Republicans have been both heartfelt and well-earned. He's managed to squeeze out challenging legislative wins with virtually no room for error, just a 3-seat majority and a party full of divergent views. It culminated with delivering President Trump's big, beautiful bill right on July 4th.
You've said all you've ever aspired to be was a fireman, and congrats, because you're Speaker of the House. You are now putting out literally 5 alarm fires every single day. What has this been like to kind of deal with getting all of this legislation, lots of different things passed, but the big, beautiful bill especially? What is the secret sauce, if you will?
Well, for me, I'm pretty open about this. It's a matter of faith, you know. I quote often John Quincy Adams. He said, duty is ours, results are God's, right? So that's a very liberating way to live. It is my biblical worldview. You know, we be faithful in the little things that God puts before us today, and then He takes care of the rest. And so that's what I do here. There's a lot of patience and prayer that delivers all these legislative victories. It's not pulling rabbits out of a magic hat, as some people have tried to analogize the last few days. It's a lot of work that goes into this, and frankly, a lot of faith.
And the commander-in-chief clearly shows faith in Johnson.
If you keep up this pace for another week, you go down as the greatest speaker in the House in history. He's been going at a fervent pace. Would you say that's right? Your wife probably says, you are crazy. You've been aging beautifully at front.
This first 6 months of the Trump administration has been the most productive and most effective, arguably, of any in history, and all of U.S. history. I mean, since the founders' era, because you have a close alignment between the White House and the Senate and the House.
And they had one more element, a plan.
We thought very deliberately and carefully about how we would go about the first 100 days, the first 300 days. This was all planned. And now we're implementing those plans. And the Democrats made a major mistake, tactical error, by giving President Trump 4 years and all of us to plan for what this would look like.
Democrats, though, argue Johnson and the GOP made a big tactical error with the signature legislation that will cost them their majority in next year's midterms. They call it wholly immoral.
They say food assistance, Medicare, some of these cuts and all of that, they call that immoral. But what is the morality here, the way the Republicans, the way you guys see it?
I'm glad you brought it up. Food assistance and Medicare aren't touched in this program. No one is going to lose their health care. They're going to try to pretend that they have the upper hand on the morality. I love the debate, and I'm anxious to engage in it any place, anytime. What we did in the Big Beautiful Bill is exactly along the moral standards and something we're proud to do. Because what we did, for example, instead of taking health care away from people, what we did is we strengthened the safety net programs. So what we've done is we've reintroduced a work requirement, right? 20 hours a week, by the way, not draconian requirements, but all you have to do is have a job, be looking for a job, be in a job training program, or volunteer in your community for 20 hours a week if you're going to be on Medicaid. It comports with common sense and morality. Work, we find our dignity in work. It's good for a young man to have to help pull the wagon and not ride on it. That's the right and moral thing to do.
Speaker Johnson's confidence goes beyond that morality to something bigger and providential. After seeing both the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania and Florida fail, Johnson became convinced that Trump would win the presidency. He shares with us what he told the president during those days.
Scripture's clear. God is the one that raises up those in authority, and he has selected you. To me, it seems obvious you're going to win another term. And what a profound thing it is to be raised up by God to lead the greatest nation in the history of the world for the second time. He thinks of it that way as well. And you hear him use that language himself in recent months and since the inauguration.
Johnson believes it changed Donald Trump, which has led to an extremely effective second term, especially when it comes to working with Congress.
President Trump's head and heart are in exactly the right place right now, where the American people need them to be, and that where we want him to be. He thinks very contemplatively and very deliberately in his decision process.
It's become a match, some might say, made in heaven. Johnson and Trump seem like an unlikely pair for sure. A brash New Yorker and a jovial evangelical from Louisiana. But it works. Eventually, Johnson won't have Trump at his side as he eventually rides off into the sunset. But the battle for America will soldier on.
So we're going to be in a contest between actual worldviews, between two competing visions on who we are as Americans and who we're going to be. And I think our party has a very important role. MAG is part of that. And it'll be an interesting time for the next 250 years of the country.
In the interim, Mike Johnson is just taking it one day at a time, rejoicing always and praying without ceasing. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, David. And coming up, digital devices to track your health progress. The HHS push for Americans to use wearables after this.
Welcome back. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wants all Americans using wearable health devices as part of his effort to make America healthy again.
Yeah, but as CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson explains, there could be some potential drawbacks.
Wearables are electronic devices that use sensors to collect real-time health data that can be transmitted to specific platforms so that you can analyze the information or share with your doctor. Studies show these wearables can help diagnose conditions while helping motivate people to adopt healthier lifestyles. That's why HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is promoting their use.
My vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years.
They're already seen on wrists in the form of fitness trackers and smartwatches. People use them to measure movement, heart rate, help detect sleep apnea, and glucose monitors that measure blood sugar.
I've personally had friends who've utterly changed their lives just from wearing a glucose meter. And they've lost weight, they've lost their diabetes, diagnoses, and you see this happen again and again.
Doctors often recommend wearables such as ECGs that monitor cardiac activity.
There have been people whose lives have been saved because their wearable devices were able to detect over the course of 24 hours an abnormal heart rhythm That then brought them to their healthcare provider, who took a deeper look and found out that, yes, there is an anomaly, a problem going on right now with the heart.
Tech companies continue to expand options, such as this one designed to prevent sudden infant death syndrome, or this necklace to help improve posture.
We're about to launch one of the biggest advertising campaigns in HHS history to encourage Americans to use wearables. It's a way of people can take control over their own health.
Yet, alongside the praise, privacy concerns exist.
The citizens that are wearing these health devices don't necessarily know what information is being shared and whom it's being shared with.
For example, health companies could potentially sell data of certain patients, leading insurance companies to potentially raise their rates. That's why customers should be careful.
I think transparency from the company that is managing that data is a critical point for the patient to feel comfortable and understand what is actually happening with it.
Another issue involves accessibility. Kennedy says his agency is working on ways to make glucose monitors more available.
It's $80 a month, and we're exploring ways of making sure that that those costs can be paid for.
So while studies show wearables can improve health metrics and even save lives, issues such as data sharing and affordability persist. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Thank you, Lori. Coming up, service animals as you've never seen before, bringing joy and smiles to patients. Stay tuned. Finally tonight, a California nonprofit has developed an interesting twist on animal therapy.
Yeah, this is really cute. It's healing by way of mini horses. The organization Mini Therapy Horses began serving a local veterans hospital back in 2008. Since then, 9 tiny horses have become certified. That means they take their tricks, like this guy here who's playing the piano with his nose, to bedsides across the state to offer an adorable distraction. The horses are especially loved at Shriners Children's Hospital, where horses help escort patients to and from surgery.
I have never heard of tiny horses. I have to say they're adorable. And look at that one, walking.
That's amazing. I bet kids love that. That's really cool.
Not so sure about the piano playing, though.
Yeah. I wonder what that sounded like.
Thanks for watching.
Have a great night.